So I want to talk about this Morgan Wallen situation. This news isn't new. This happened last Monday. He was coming home with a bunch of buddies. It was late Monday night or early Tuesday morning. I don't know when exactly it was. But so he's coming home with a bunch of buddies. They're all drunk as skunks. And he's stumbling up the steps to get to his house. He can't even walk straight, slurring his words. And he tells one of his buddies, hey, take care of this PAM effort. And he says, hey, take care of this PA, and then he drops the N-bomb. And that's it. And then his neighbor recorded it, apparently on on a house cam or whatever. I don't know if they were actually recording themselves, but they gave it to TMZ, and TMZ runs with the story the next day. Well, as a result, everything, like Morgan Wallen has completely lost his career. His agency suspended him. All of the streaming services, they stopped featuring his music. He's not allowed back on CMT. There's a country academy, I think it's the Academy of Country Music Awards, whatever it's called. I'm not really much of a country fan, but anyway, the Academy of Country Music is not going to let him, compete for their award show or whatever. So, as predicted, he comes out and apologizes. It's the typical rehearsed apology you hear from all these stars who get into trouble with the powers that be. He comes out and says, this is a word that should never be used. I apologize for saying this. I promise to do better. And, of course, his lame apology did not save him. He still loses his career, loses everything. So the thing that people were immediately jumping on and saying is, oh, okay, well, this just shows that he's racist, and whenever people are drunk, their true side comes out. But, Eric, you were mentioning this. This was somebody else recently. There was a situation where someone got upset at someone for dropping this N-bomb with the light A at the end. You were explaining to me.
Yes.
Is it some, like it's like a gaming culture, a bro culture or something?
Here's the thing. So it's that was in reference to a viral video of a white guy in some kind of a corner store, convenience store, a gas station store, obviously pretty drunk and frequently using it. So the key is that there's the version of it that ends with A, and there's the hard R where it ends with ER. And obviously where it ends with A is the lyric you hear in rap songs all the time. Whereas ER is the racial slur. And he was just spouting, it's what's good, man? What's my good, man? And eventually this black guy standing behind him beats him over the head with a can of iced tea or something and just knocks him down. And then he's beating the crap out of him on the ground. And I saw that video, and probably in regards to this situation as well, I can tell, and I don't like using this phrase very often, but in this case it will apply. The guy in that viral video could be described as white trash. I don't know if that would apply to this country music star who's now also the subject of this controversy. But I saw that video and I thought to myself, that reminds me of so many guys I went to high school with. I went to high school in an area, probably you could call it maybe a lower income area. So a lot of the kids that I went to high school with, it was known as the more ghetto high school of my hometown. There were only two high schools. There was the upper class one and then the lower class one that I went to. And so many kids in my high school, and this is back in like 2009 to 2013, so early 2010s, so many kids would use the variation of the word with the A at the end to address each other in the halls. What's good? And not just black kids, but white kids, Hispanic kids, they all use that word to address each other, between other races, among the same races, and no one thought anything of it. That's just part of the slang. That's just part of how people talk. They don't mean anything. They're not saying, oh, let's go lynch some. Like, that's not what they're saying. That's just... Again, I didn't use the word. I wouldn't use the word like that. But there are so many people who use the word like that among themselves and among their friends. That just, hey, what's good? What's good?
Yeah. And so Wallen is interesting. He's 27. So this is kind of the time when he would have been in high school as well. This would have been late 2000s. This would have been the time he probably said this with his black friends. They all joked around about it and everything. So here's the thing, this is something that in the late 90s, early 2000s, this would have been completely foreign to, whenever I came of age, whenever I was, old enough to know what was going on in the world. This is something that people just wouldn't have said. Because at the time, and this is probably because of gaming, because of the internet culture, you got to remember the late 90s, early 2000s, teenagers weren't involved in internet culture. There was really no internet culture to speak of, especially in smaller towns where a lot of these kids that you're talking about, the lower income, so-called white trash kids are. So there was no, your friends were your neighbors, the kids you played with. They were the ones that you got your vocabulary from. They were the ones that learned, you learned your social mores, them and your parents. At the time, that word was only considered a pejorative. So if somebody used that word, they would only use it in the context in which they're referring to a black person as a POS. So in areas where we would call someone a POS, that would only be applied to black people. Now, here's why this is key. Because that word literally means a black person, because it was taken from the Spanish word for black and basically, just made easier to sound in English, it became a pejorative term to use only for blacks. This is why blacks get so upset about it, because it doesn't make sense if you use it toward a white person. So what was happening is you would have blacks would use it like my dude. They would use it like a substitute for, hey, what's up, bro?
Exactly.
They would use it like that to one another because they're black. And it makes sense in that context because it literally means black. It can't mean anything else. So if you tell that to a non-black person, it doesn't make sense. So the thing that they're arguing is if a white person says it, it only holds its pejorative definition. Whereas if a white person or if a black person uses it, they can be joking around with it. I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, like if somebody, let's imagine that Morgan Wallen gets in a time machine and he goes back to, let's say he goes back 20 years to 2001, and he throws that term around. The first, around his white buddies would kind of look at him weird the first time he used it. The second or third time, they would have stopped him and said, wait a minute, why are you trying to sound black? That would have been the response. They would say, why are you talking like that? You're white, like act white. That would have been the response at that time.
Cultural appropriation, right?
Exactly. And it was kind of in an interesting way. People at the time, no one would culturally appropriate that word. And then as time went on and you had white kids start playing with black kids, whether through gaming, they started picking up the same words because technically, remember, we're supposed to be moving toward a colorblind society. So then everyone, the white kids assume, okay, well, we're all the same. There's no difference. So we're just going to pick up each other's lingo. We're just going to pick up each other's expressions. The problem is, especially older generations, they're not in tune to that. So if they hear a white person saying it, like back in the 90s, if a white person said it, they were literally cussing out a black person. That you were either trying to pick a fight with a black person or you only use that word to like a child molester or a thief or a murderer or somebody who's just, that you would literally cuss out and want to pick a fight with. Nobody used it in a joking manner. So this is something that people need to understand. There's a little bit of a disconnect and misunderstanding here. This is the natural result whenever you have white kids trying to be black. But now, because you got a whole generation, like Morgan Wallen's generation has come up, and which it's cool to do this, to them, like saying that word is just like saying dude or saying my man, which is why his apology is completely insincere. He apologized because it's like somebody took. It's almost like let's say you're working a job. And the boss has some kind of dumb rule, like let's say you can't bring a New York Yankees ball cap into his place of employment because he's a Boston Red Sox fan. If he sees a New York Yankees hat, you're going to be fired. Somebody brings a New York Yankees cap and they forget about it. He gets called into the office and they apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry I brought this cap in. No, they're not. They're sorry they got caught.
They're sorry they got caught. Exactly.
They're sorry he's got this dumb rule that they have to abide by. They're just trying to keep their job. And that's what it is with Morgan Wallen's apology. But look, within the age of cancel culture, you can give all the apologies you want to. All that does is make you look weak. It doesn't actually accomplish anything.
It proves that they have won, that
right.
They've dictated the parameters of the argument, that you are now on defense. But I just couldn't help but to add a little bit of levity to the situation. You mentioned, white kids basically trying to imitate black culture. I'm getting like PTSD style flashbacks to the kind of style I saw at my high school where lots of the white kids, they listen to rap music and stuff like that. But because I'm from a farming community, they also loved country music. So it was this perfect blend, kind of like this guy's situation, a perfect blend of country culture and rap culture, which is why when that horrible song Old Town Road came out, that was literally, I'm like, thank God this did not come out when I was in high school. Because if it did, everyone everywhere would be playing this stupid song from their truck speakers, on their iPods, everything. And I'm just like, this is literally the song that defines that kind of style.
And this is really part of what's really ruined country music. I stopped listening to country music in 2013. I just couldn't stand it anymore. At that point, so like from 2013 until 2019, I was just completely checked out of the country music world. I didn't listen to any country. And if I did, it was like something from the 90s or something like that, back when country was real country. Yeah. And finally, in 2019, you actually have like Luke Combs. You got some artists who are coming out who are actually producing music that does sound country. They're finally getting away from the bro country, but that bro country was really just a bunch of country white kids trying to act and sound black. And it really came out with the Florida Georgia Line song back in, I think it was 2013. But I was working at a Chick-fil-A at the time, and they were playing that song on their phones nonstop. I was like, This is the literal death of country music. Like, this crap is so terrible.
Country music has been through so much. It barely survived with Taylor Swift's attempt to kill it with country pop.
Yeah.
Which that was a horrible phase, and it managed to come back from that.
But the thing
and
is,
then
like,
the
pop
Old Town
music,
Road came along and finished it
with
off.
pop music, you can actually cross over. With rap, there is no crossover between rap and country. Like in Old Town Road is the perfect example. It just doesn't jive.
There's one country kind of rap style song in country music that is acceptable, and that's Jason Aldean's Dirt Road Anthem. That is a good song. It is kind of rapping, like not quite like rap like you would think, but it's a country song, but it's done in the style of rap, and that's actually a very good song. I enjoyed that one a lot.
But going back to the misunderstanding, like a lot of people genuinely thought that Morgan Wallen is just, he's racist. He doesn't like black people, and because he's racist, he uses this term, which is probably what people would have justifiably thought if somebody used this term back in the 90s. But that, again, this is going back to a cultural and really a generational misunderstanding. And it's not just the generational misunderstanding. It's also there's also a racial misunderstanding here. And this is a perfect example. Jimmy Allen he's a country singer. He happens to be black. And he gave an interview with Cody Allen, with CMT's Cody Allen, shortly after the George Floyd death.
You've been my friend for a long time. And I always thought we had the most frank conversations. Like, we would just lay it all out there, how I felt, how you felt. We've talked about some of these things before. So that's why I wanted to have you on, because I watched that video of George Floyd like we all did. I had emotions, but I bet you had a unique set of emotions that only a person seeing it through your eyes feels and sees. So when you saw that video, what did you think?
I pictured my son. I've seen a lot of videos, man. That was probably one of the worst when that whole videos that I saw, where you see this guy get killed on camera. Like, for 8.5 minutes, he was already cuffed. The guy has this knee on his neck, and you can see he keeps repositioning his knee. And I was like, wow, man, what is going through this guy's head? How messed up is his heart to not see this is somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody's friend that he's purposely taken the life of.
So notice he assumes that the officer, Chauvin, I remember his first name, who's kneeling on George Floyd's neck.
Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, he assumes that Derek Chauvin is purposely taking George Floyd's life. That's the assumption. The assumption for most people when they see that is obviously, it looks like he's using police brutality. I don't know of anyone, I've never talked to anyone who actually said that they assumed that Chauvin was purposely trying to take his life. That's a really weird choice of words he uses there.
That's a heck of a jump you've got to make that assumption.
Right, that Chauvin was purposely trying to take George Floyd's life. There's this guy who's actually just down the road in Charlottesville. He does a lot of YouTube commentary on country music. His name is Grady Smith. He put out a video on the Morgan Wallen situation. He mentioned he was very generous, but you got to remember you got to look at where he starts his assumptions from. He said, "Now this is really sensitive, especially since 2020 was the year of George Floyd. So even this person who spends his life on YouTube, Grady Smith, I'm assuming he hasn't taken the time to actually go look up the body cam footage from the George Floyd death, and hasn't seen that the entire Black Lives Matter narrative in 2020 was based on a misunderstanding, and it was used for political purposes. I mean, all you have to do is go to YouTube and type in George Floyd body cam footage, and the entire narrative, all these assumptions, including the assumptions that Jimmy Allen is making in this video, but this video came out just a few days after George Floyd's death, are completely wrong. So why would he automatically jump to the conclusion and the assumption that Derek Chauvin was trying to kill George Floyd? Let's listen to what he has to say next.
And I equate that to this, to where if you have no access to black people in your life, and the only black people you see are on TV, and they're robbers and they're murderers, and the media pushes it this way, and you see movies, and you have a family that might tell you, okay, you got to be careful around black people. They do this, they do that. When the rest of the world slowly starts to wake them up, they have to unlearn everything that they've been taught, and that doesn't happen overnight. So they're trying to learn the new ways of everybody being equal and equality, and we're a lot more alike than we are different. And they're in their mind, like, they could be hurt. Like, I can't believe my family did this to me, made me feel I was superior than this person.
What world is this idiot living in?
Okay, so listen, your reaction, right? Your natural reaction to what he just said, it would be the reaction of the vast majority of people in this country if they had heard what he just said. But the thing is, most people who watched that YouTube video of his interview, most people who would have watched that or listened to that live, they already have started from the assumption that there's a huge segment of white people in America who raise their children like that. They've already started from the assumption that there's a huge segment of the American population that raises its children to believe that white people are superior to black people. And you've got to understand that some black people have been passing this propaganda down to their children and their children's children, their grandchildren. So when a black man sees a white police officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck, his immediate assumption is he's trying to kill him because he's black. Because they have been brainwashed to believe that there are white people out there who literally teach their children that you've got to be careful around black people and that white people are better than and superior to black people. I have never in my life ever heard of any, maybe there are some white people out there that believe that. I've never encountered them, and I don't think that Jimmy Allen has either.
Well, just the several leaps that he makes. First off, he says all these people who have been watching TV and movies and all the bad guys are black. I'm like, excuse me? I mean, I can name plenty of movies that I watched as a kid where the bad guys are not black. I can assure you, where there are plenty of heroic black guys. Like, just that assumption alone is wrong. Then he goes on to say, and then there's going to be white people who will wake up. You know, we got to reprogram. There it is again, the deprogram, reprogram. He says there are white people who are going to wake up and say, how can my family do this? I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't you just say it was movies and pop culture that did this? Now you're suddenly pinning it on the families? Which is even worse. Now you're blaming the families for what they watch on TV? That's...
But you got to think about it. Most people, they just listen to music. And they don't think about who they're listening to, what the person believes, what the person thinks about them as human beings, as individuals. And you've got a bunch of country white kids, they're listening to Jimmy Allen's music. And they have no idea that this is what he believes about them because of the color of their skin. They listen to rappers and they start using the lingo, they start dropping the N-bomb, and then all of a sudden they get slapped in the face. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, I was just joking around. That's just like, that means dude or bro. No. See, the reason why the idea that there's a difference between that word with an A and that word with an ER is false. When black people speak and they use that word, that's just their normal accent. They learned English from people in Virginia in the 1600s.
The Cajuns, right?
Well, the Cajun accent morphed out of that, just like their accent did. But people in Virginia in the 1600s, just like British people today, they didn't pronounce their ERs. Any word that ended in ER, they pronounced it like it ended in A. So if a British person pronounced the N-word, they would pronounce it closer to the way black people pronounce it than the way white Americans pronounce it. That's just their accent. So for black people, there is no difference between the word with an A or an ER because it's the same word. It has the same meaning. It's pronounced the same way in their accent. So when white people start pronouncing it like black people do, saying that it has a different meaning, black people are like, no, not only are you appropriating my accent, but you're also you're using a word that's used to demean my people. So this is where there's a cultural disconnect. And so these rednecks, they listen to this rap music and they think, okay, well, I'll just use it like they use it. And they keep getting slapped in the face. And it's like over and over and over again. And I don't know how many times country fried rednecks are going to have to keep getting slapped in the face before they finally get it through their thick noggins that they're not welcome in black culture. So I don't know, maybe Morgan Wallen's cancellation will be a wake up call to many of them that you're not just going to jump across cultures like this and everything's going to be hunky-dory. No, there's a significant amount of prejudice that exists. And Jimmy Allen is a perfect example of that. That interview is a perfect example. When you start with the assumption that there's a bunch of racist white people out there and you see a white cop kneeling on a black man's neck, you're just going to assume that the reason is racism. A lot of people, they don't realize just how the industry thinks about them. I'm talking specifically about country music fans. So Variety magazine went and talked to some of the executives at these companies that canceled Morgan Wallen. And it's very interesting what they have to say about their fans, because of course fans are writing in, calling them, saying, put him back on the air. This is ridiculous. You shouldn't be giving in to cancel culture. So they asked this one executive, what does the industry get that many fans don't or won't? And he says, quote, "What we're all hoping for, the collective we, the industry, is that we don't want to be the backwards genre anymore. There are a lot of great artists and great people in this genre. So to take the stance that we did collectively as an industry was important because it was time to move that forward. If the fans understand that or don't, I don't think we can control that. People can write comments on Facebook like F your organization all day, but that doesn't change our bottom line of what we have to do." So what's interesting, he says, what we're hoping for, the collective is in the industry, is that we don't want to be the backwards genre anymore. So get this. You got these people who run companies, who run in Nashville, and they consider themselves the backwards genre. How are you supposed to successfully lead an industry if you think that that industry is backwards? It just shows it just shows the elitist mindset that they have about people who listen to country music. And they see themselves as the enlightened elites in Nashville, and all these people out in the country who listen to the music that makes them rich are just a bunch of backwards, idiotic rubes who need to be educated, either with a carrot or a stick. And it starts with the same assumption that Jimmy Allen made. Country star Mickey Guyton, I guess I'm pronouncing that, Guyton, Mickey Guyton. This is from TMZ. So she says she's one of a small handful of well-known black singers in the genre. She spoke about Morgan Wallen's situation, and she gave some poignant insight, including an olive branch for Morgan himself. She writes, quote, "When I read comments saying this is not who we are, I laugh because this is exactly who country music is." So this is a country singer. She is a country singer, and she says, when I read comments saying this is not who we are, I laugh because this is exactly who country music is. Why are you singing in a genre that's racist? Why are you putting out music in a genre that you think is racist? So after Morgan Wallen was canceled, the fans basically gave a collective middle finger to his cancellation, which shows it just shows the vast divide that exists between industry elites and the consumers. On Wednesday, Wallen's digital sales increased from Tuesday's by 327%. When it came to album sales, the jump was a staggering 1,221%. I mean, I don't think country music has ever seen a collective statement quite like this. I mean, this is just, I think people are finally starting to get tired of it. You know, when it's politics, a lot of people can ignore politics. When it's music that they listen to, when it starts to bleed into entertainment, eventually people are going to get sick and tired of this cancel culture. And you know what? It's going to be interesting to see. I think he's going to cuck. I honestly think that Morgan Wallen is going to cuck because if you're dumb enough to use it, if you're dumb enough to have this word in your vocabulary, you are probably one of the naive youngsters who came up in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and didn't know anything about history, didn't know anything about race relations. So he's probably just going to do whatever he needs to. But I think eventually this is really the first time that we've seen an outcry like this against cancel culture on the consumer level. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch to see just how much more of this people are going to take, because it can't go on like this. Eventually, when they're continually policing speech, continually policing thought, they're continually just basically blatantly showing what they think about the common people in the country. Eventually, it's going to come back to bite them. It may not be this year, it may not be next year, but the day of reckoning for these industry leaders will hit them in their pocketbook. Eventually, competition will arise that will dethrone these industry leaders.
Sooner or later, they're going to overstep their boundaries. Sooner or later, enough people are going to finally stand up and say, "Okay, this is ridiculous. You know, why are you trying to cancel our favorite singer, our favorite actor?" There's eventually is going to be sizable pushback that some celebrities won't be canceled as easily, but it'll be also the broader societal realization that, again, a phrase I think could be used to describe a lot that's going on in America right now being pushed by the left. This is not sustainable. You cannot just keep canceling everybody who disagrees with you or says a foul word every now and then, because sooner or later you're just going to cancel everybody and you're going to have to cancel yourselves. You know that so many leftists have similar skeletons in their closet. They're just better at hiding it.
Yeah, and just one more thing before we move on to our featured topic. A lot of people love to bash cancel culture, and they'll complain about it. They'll, they turn it into a political issue. But I think we need to consider how exactly would you defeat something like this when you have essentially a cartel of elites who run every industry, and they decide they've pretty much already set up like the social credit system that exists in China. They've already set that up in the United States. It's just instead of the government enforcing it, you have corporations who are enforcing it. One thing that's not helpful is conservative media, because I've noticed conservative media, they actually have a financial incentive to keep cancel culture alive. And we see a perfect example of this. I don't know if you saw the interview on Newsmax in which they had the MyPillow guy. What's his name?
Mike Lindell.
Mike Lindell. So they had Mike Lindell on, and the host was talking to him about his pillows being canceled at Bed Bath & Beyond. And they asked him how long he thinks that's going to last. And Mike Lindell's answer was, I hope it's permanent. And then he went into why they canceled him, which was because of his beliefs on the election. And the Newsmax host basically just walked off the set and told him, we can't do this. We can't talk about this, because what the Newsmax folks wanted him to say was, well, I sure hope it's temporary. We really need to get control of this. This cancel culture is really dangerous for our society. They want the viewers to continually come back to them, so they'll have all these people on their shows who have been canceled, and they'll give them an outlet to complain. And this doesn't change anything. This doesn't affect anything. It allows viewers to feel like they're being catered to by the conservative media. It allows the conservative media to make a bunch of money from these viewers. And it allows the canceled to feel like they have some sympathy and go air their grievances. But the people who have been canceled, they don't benefit from it. And potential entrepreneurs, they don't benefit from it because cancel culture is still there. The only way to end cancel culture is for parents, instead of encouraging their kids to get jobs, which is what they've been doing for 2 generations. You think about the lower class people who are the targets of cancel culture. They've been encouraging their kids to go get jobs. Just go get a job. Well, instead of encouraging their kids to go get jobs, they need to encourage their kids to go start businesses. Encourage their kids to become entrepreneurs. They need to encourage their kids to go be the industry. Don't suck off the industry. Go create your own industry. And that's how you're going to see cancel culture come to an end, when you have parallel industries that these fascists who run our current industry aren't going to be able to compete with.
It's just that that never-ending political dynamic that you do thrive economically. There is prosperity off of being the resistance, off of being the minority party. Like, Republicans are great at this. Republicans are so much better, the right in general, up to this point, is better at being the resistance, the opposition, than they are at being in power. We saw that, of course, during the first 2 years of the Trump administration, when the Republicans in Congress sat on their hands and did absolutely nothing. From
a political standpoint, that's true, but the Republicans are going to have to start taking that same attitude from a business standpoint. They have to be the corporate resistance, because that's why we have cancel culture, because social activists and social justice warriors, they decided, we're not accomplishing anything by just screaming into a bullhorn on a street corner. Let's go create industry and force people to accept our worldview if they want to be able to put food on the table.